Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from Yellowcat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Lawyers, what is the most unethical thing you have seen someone do for a lawsuit and won? Obligatory not a lawyer, but my parents got caught up in a slimy lawyer's talents. Basically, they had carpet installed in their house in 2005, paid in cash, got a receipt, and went on with their lives. 7 years later, they get a letter from some law firm saying the company they'd had install their carpet never received payment and would press charges if they didn't pay up. My dad, being the paranoid F he is, had kept the receipt and said he'd see them in court. He did some research, found out what the attorney can and can't do in this situation, and also found out that the attorney had been working with the flooring company for years, accusing paying customers of not paying and collecting excess money from them under threat of lawsuit. Fast forward to the court date. Dad shows up knowing his rights with a receipt stating exactly how much he paid and when. Attorney has nothing except a copy of the invoice for my dad's payment that he leaves in his folder the whole time. Not only does the attorney break almost every rule of court possible, he completely slanders my dad, calling him sketchy looking and dishonest, even though the receipt is literally right there in front of him, insists that the receipt is fake despite having a copy of the invoice. Real S stuff. My dad lost that case. Before anyone had even left the courtroom, the attorney walked up to chat with the judge, who asked if they were still on for brunch tomorrow. Because it was a super small circuit, this dude had been able to buddy up to a judge to the extent he was allowed to do basically whatever he wanted and still win his cases. A year later, my parents sued the attorney for misconduct and requested an out-of-circuit judge who essentially told that slimy schmuck to sit the F down and shut the F up when he tried to pull something against the rules. They won that case. When I was working as a public defender in the Detroit State Court, I routinely saw cops lie about the existence of video recordings of an event. The law says they have to have the cams running when they make a stop, but in all the cases I saw, not a single cop was ever able to produce a video. Either the video had malfunctioned, been accidentally deleted after the event, or the camera was broken. It was a weird place to work. The cops very much viewed the defense lawyers and the legal process as their enemy. I'm sure there were a lot of unjust outcomes as a result. I had a public defender who was used to plea deals. After the most minor of a fender bender accident, the angry driver accused me of assault. The second officer on the scene arrested me for assault and resisting arrest. On the stand, he blatantly lied, claiming that I was holding onto a fence and kicking at him. Fence in question was a flimsy white vinyl picket fence. My public defender asked him if he witnessed me assaulting the other angry driver. He said he did not. That was the end of that case. 2 weeks later, the resisting arrest charges were dismissed. The second trial was the other driver. I was found not guilty after both of us testifying. Angry driver's wife divorced him. Guess she was tired of living with her always angry husband. I was facing jail time and 3 years probation when I told my PD to say to the DA that there is no dealing with my case. Either the DA dismisses all charges or I want my trial. It took 11 months of going back every month before I was finally cleared of all charges. I did a slight fist bump when I heard the judge's final finding of not guilty. My PD was walking on air after the case ended. For a year, I worked for the most unethical attorney I have ever met. Here are my top 2 stories. He took on a client that was injured at work. He sent him to a doctor that he would refer to as a W. Since the attorney normally does defense work, the doctor came back saying the injury was clearly not work-related. The attorney called the doctor to inform him that he represented the employee and not the employer in this case. The doctor then wrote a report that the injury was clearly work-related. One afternoon, the attorney's assistant ran into my room and said I need to go to the courthouse right now to defend the attorney in a traffic case. Attorney told me he had no run-ins with law enforcement before, had never been ticketed before, and would just like to get supervision. I go in front of the judge and present this information, and I get him supervision. I go back to the office, and curiosity got the best of me. I searched his criminal record. Yeah, turns out he had another outstanding speeding ticket and you could see his mugshot for domestic violence. Oh, and he tried to fine me $5,000 for going to a doctor's appointment on my lunch break. Yeah, at that point, I literally walked out. I started out working for a commercial law firm advising companies on environmental compliance. We had a client who was a large oil and gas distributor which owned a contaminated site in a populated area. My boss advised the client to transfer ownership of the site to a newly incorporated limited liability company with no assets. That way, when the government ordered the site to be remediated, the client wouldn't be liable for the cleanup. I left not too long after that. I'm not based in the United States. Yes, lawyers exist in other countries too. A friend of a friend woke up in a hospital. He has no idea what happened, but he was brought out of an induced coma from a bike wreck. The car he ended up under was owned by a lawyer. The lawyer and a cop forced the doctors to get the guy out of a coma long enough to sign a statement when no family was present. The lawyer never mentioned to the doctor that it was he who was driving and not a person he represented. The lawyer then went on to sue for damages on his car by the guy and his bicycle. In-N-Out Burger sued my company for using their name. We have a similar name and are in a state that doesn't have In-N-Out Burger. And we are in the automotive industry. In-N-Out Burger purchased a body shop so they could tell the court that they too were in the automotive industry. Mind you, they bought it after they sued us and were looking like they were going to lose. We won that lawsuit. Most attorneys are really ethical. Generally, the most egregious ethical violations are lack of diligence or maintenance on a case and general laziness. Now, some lawyers will do some shady BS like trolling burn warrants for cases and things like that. Occasionally, you will hear about a person withholding something that should have been disclosed, but the scummier happenings are what some people will do to get a client and hold a client. Hourly billing attorneys often get a reputation for going through unnecessary crap to milk the retainer and help hit their minimum billable for the year. Lawyers can be really unethical dealing with other lawyers out of spite. It isn't to win, but just to be an a-hole to lawyers and make their lives miserable. Lawyers can be really cool and ethical, or they can be petty a-holes. Kind of like any job in life. Bumped the back of a Chevy Malibu at a red light back in 1993. Lady claimed she had to be on disability as a result. My car was a Honda CRX. The compression thingies in the front bumper weren't collapsed, which indicated it was less than 10 kilometers an hour impact. In court, I was shown a photo of their car and it looked like they backed into a tree, central dent, and huge. She won the case against my insurance company. No idea how to this day. My psychologist told me about the time he and one of the most powerful lawyers in town were in court. The opposing lawyer was even more bad a-hole than this guy. He had to find a chink in his armor. So, upon the opposing lawyer opening his briefcase, lawyer number 1 notices it was full of shoe shine stuff. The guy is obsessed with his shoes. Before the trial, lawyer number 1 greets the opposing lawyer, and while shaking hands, he accidentally stepped on his foot. Shrink said he never had to try so hard not to erupt in laughter in court. Opposing lawyer was so flustered because the trial had started and he couldn't shine his shoes that he lost the case. Lawyer number 1's son is my current attorney. Lawyer for 12 years here, specializing in estates and trusts. My client was challenging the will her husband left behind, giving the wife and son an equal split of the sizable inheritance he left behind. The son used to have an opioid addiction, but had been in treatment and a program and had been clean for over 5 years. My client hired a private investigator who befriended the son and pushed him to start using again, selling him a few pills on hidden camera. The wife ended up using the video to successfully convince the judge her husband was under the impression their son was clean when he wrote the will, but since the video showed he still had a serious drug problem, the will could be challenged and he couldn't be trusted with his inheritance. She got the entire estate. I'm not a lawyer, but a man who was a customer for the construction company I worked for at the time was a real piece of work. When Hurricane Sandy hit, a tree fell over and hit into his son's rooms and made a hole in the ceiling. He then decided for the family to take a vacation after the storm and to let the hole in tree be for a bit more than a month. This way, there was massive amounts of water damage and the house got to be labeled as unlivable. He did this so that not only could he collect massive amounts of money from the insurance and from the government, but also turn around and sue them for much more money. He got all that money. He had his old house torn down and hired my company to build his brand new state-of-the-art mansion that he planned. What the company didn't know is that this guy was a serial lawsuit filer. He sues everyone all the time. He had a decent paying job, but he makes the bulk of his money more from lawsuits, it seems. He sued the bank once for a misfiling and somehow got tons of money from that. He then turned around and sued the lawyer he had for that bank case for not getting him as much money as he wanted. He won that one too somehow. The project ended up being a nightmare. He had two people who were not licensed architects writing up his blueprints and getting them stamped by a sloppy license architect that didn't review the blueprints, probably so he could sue later. And when I say sloppy, the head of my company had to point out how the roof was sticking into the body of the garage and how the steps didn't match up and make it to the different floors, etc. And then give it back to the customer to have them redo it all multiple times. Customer also would not contact the plumber in time to do the work on the days needed, so there were many wasted days. Customer would not pay any of the bills on time when they were due, and we then found out later that they were taking doctored pictures the whole time of the property when the company was not on the scene at the time, and calling the town for trash complaints, complaining about wood, pipes, metal, and other materials sitting in the back of property and on the sides, not real trash, on his own plot of land during construction, so that he could sue us later on. As the job was starting to finish up, it was about 6 months behind schedule due to all these problems and more that were out of our control. The head of the company I was with was going to a European country for a wedding of their nephew, and that was prefaced and known before the project was accepted. When they left for said wedding, customer tried to directly contract one of the subcontractors to take over and do the whole project, illegal and written as forbidden to even talk prices of anything in contract with subcontractor, and put into motion the whole baloney lawsuit against our company. Unfortunately, the company I was with came back to pure H in arguments and then pulled out of the project and planned to sue the customer when he refused to pay his next installment, and the installment that had been overdue by a month. Left the house in a terrible limbo for a while since no one else could work with the licensed new material my company was using on his home. On top of that, the lawyer that our company hired to sue the customer went AWOL, and they had to find a new lawyer that did nothing for months. So instead, they got paperwork in the mail telling them that the customer was suing them for breaking contract, not true, and the other way around. This led to the new business partner screwing over the head of the company and stealing money from the joint accounts as they ran away, ultimately leading to the head of the construction company closing down their business/HOC's life's work from all the lost money. They never got to countersue to customer, and the customer had to drop the case because they really didn't have anything. In the end though, they got to have half of their new mansion built for 1/16 of the price before getting someone new to finish it up, and they screwed an honest company out of business. Thank you for watching. Guys, thank you for all the support and likes. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. See you next time.